Someone becomes distant and you assume they're losing interest. Someone gets defensive and you decide they're hiding something. Someone criticizes you and you think you've discovered exactly who they are. Someone seems unusually confident and you assume they must feel secure inside. But human behavior is rarely that simple. What you see on the surface can be the final expression of something much deeper. Memory, fear, expectation, insecurity, habit, experience, or need. And once you understand that, something interesting happens. The same behaviors you've seen your entire life can suddenly mean something very different. If you enjoy understanding the psychology behind everyday behavior and becoming more self-aware, subscribe. That's exactly what we explore here. The first truth is that people don't react only to you. They react to their interpretation of you. Imagine two people meeting the same confident person. One thinks, I like them. They know who they are. The other thinks, they're arrogant. Same person. Same behavior. Completely different interpretation. That's because nobody encounters you with an empty mind. People bring previous relationships, expectations, values, fears, insecurities, and memories into every interaction. Your directness may remind one person of honesty and another of criticism. Your independence may look admirable to one person and emotionally distant to another. Even your silence can feel peaceful to someone and uncomfortable to someone else. This doesn't mean other people's opinions are meaningless. Sometimes they see something about us that we don't see ourselves. But their reaction isn't created by you alone. When someone forms an opinion about you, you may be learning something about yourself. But you're also learning something about the lens through which they see people. And that leads to the second truth. What people react to most strongly can reveal what matters to them. Not every criticism is projection, and an intense reaction doesn't automatically expose some hidden insecurity. But intensity can still contain information. Someone deeply concerned with status may be unusually sensitive to embarrassment. Someone afraid of rejection may notice signs of exclusion before anyone else. Someone who depends heavily on control may become uncomfortable when plans suddenly change. We naturally pay attention to what our minds have learned is important. So when someone's reaction seems much larger than the situation itself, don't immediately label them dramatic, insecure, or difficult. Ask a better question. Why might this particular thing carry so much emotional weight for them? Sometimes the reaction tells you almost as much as the words. The third truth is that defensiveness often protects something more vulnerable. Correct someone gently and they suddenly become angry. Question one decision, and they give you a 10-minute explanation. Disagree with them, and what began as a simple conversation starts feeling like a battle. It's tempting to think, they're defensive so I must be right. But defensiveness doesn't automatically prove guilt. Sometimes it's protecting identity, status, belonging, self-esteem, or a person's image of themselves as competent, intelligent, good, or lovable. Think about the difference between these two experiences. I made a mistake. And this mistake proves something bad about who I am. The first can be uncomfortable. The second can feel threatening. And when identity feels threatened, people often defend much more than the original issue. So instead of asking only, why are they reacting like this? Try asking, what might this reaction be protecting? That question doesn't excuse harmful behavior. It simply helps you understand it more accurately. The fourth truth is that people often teach you how they expect relationships to work. Someone apologizes before asking for a tiny favor. Someone disappears whenever conflict begins. Someone constantly asks if you're upset with them. Someone refuses help even when they're overwhelmed. Someone treats disagreement as if the relationship itself is in danger. At first, these behaviors can seem confusing. But people don't enter relationships without history. They may have learned that asking for help creates disappointment. That conflict leads to abandonment. That vulnerability becomes ammunition. That love has to be earned. Or that depending on someone eventually becomes dangerous. So sometimes you're not only interacting with who a person is today. You're interacting with what they learned relationships were supposed to feel like. And there's an important warning here. Psychology should make you more curious, not more certain. Understanding patterns doesn't give you the ability to diagnose strangers or secretly read people's minds. One behavior is not a personality. One uncomfortable moment is not a psychological profile. Behavior gives you clues. Repeated patterns give you stronger clues. But context still matters. Which brings us to the fifth truth. Consistency usually reveals more than intensity. Human beings are naturally impressed by intense moments. A dramatic apology. A huge promise. An emotional declaration. An extraordinary act of generosity. A passionate conversation at 2 in the morning. Those moments feel meaningful because they're memorable. But one powerful moment doesn't always tell you what happens repeatedly. So ask different questions. What happens after the apology? Does the behavior actually change? After the promise, do the actions move in the same direction as the words? How does this person behave when they're tired, frustrated, inconvenienced, or no longer trying to impress you? Intensity captures attention. Consistency reveals patterns. And patterns usually give you much better information about a person than isolated moments do. If one of these truths has already made you think of someone or even recognize something in yourself, tell me which one in the comments. And if you're enjoying this perspective, leave a like. It helps more people find these conversations. The sixth truth is that how people treat those they don't need can reveal something important. Most of us manage our behavior when something valuable is at stake. A job interview, a first date, a conversation with someone influential, a situation where we want approval. That's normal. But now notice what happens when there seems to be nothing to gain. How does someone speak to a server after a mistake? How do they treat the person with the least status in the room? How do they talk about friends once those friends leave? How do they behave towards someone who can't offer them money, opportunity, attention, or recognition? No single interaction tells you everything about someone's character. People have bad days. Stress changes behavior. Context matters. But behavior when there is no obvious reward can offer a different kind of information because there is less incentive to perform. Sometimes character becomes easier to see when nobody important seems to be watching. The seventh truth is that people often repeat what feels familiar, even when the familiar hurts. This is one of the stranger contradictions in human behavior. Someone repeatedly becomes attached to emotionally unavailable partners. Someone avoids opportunities just as success becomes possible. Someone recreates almost the same conflict across completely different friendships. Someone says they desperately want peace, yet feels strangely uncomfortable when life finally becomes calm. From the outside, the question seems obvious. Why would anyone keep choosing something that makes them unhappy? But people don't always move toward what feels best. Sometimes they move toward what feels known. Familiar emotional patterns can create predictability. You may dislike the outcome, but somewhere inside the pattern, you know the rules. You know what to expect. You know who you're supposed to become. The unfamiliar can be healthier and still feel uncomfortable because it asks something new from you. New boundaries. New responses. New expectations. Sometimes even a new identity. So when you see someone repeating the same painful pattern, instead of immediately asking, why don't they just change? Try asking, what does this pattern make familiar or predictable for them? And then turn that question toward yourself. What situation keeps appearing in your life with different names and different faces? Because recognizing repetition in other people is easy. Recognizing our own requires much more honesty. And that brings us to the eighth truth, perhaps the most useful of all. People show you who they are more clearly through patterns than explanations. People can explain behavior beautifully. They can have good intentions. They can sincerely regret what happened. They can promise change and genuinely believe the promise while they're making it. But understanding someone requires holding two forms of information at the same time. What they say, and what repeatedly happens. Someone says, I care about you, but consistently disappears when you need them. Someone says, I respect your boundaries, but repeatedly tests those boundaries. Someone says, I've changed, but the same cycle keeps returning. And the opposite matters too. Someone may struggle to express affection in words, yet consistently show up when you need them. Remember what matters to you, respect your limits, and make space for your feelings. Words can tell you what a person wants, believes, intends, or hopes to become. Repeated behavior shows you the pattern they're currently living. Wisdom means paying attention to both. And that's the larger lesson behind all 8 truths. Psychology isn't supposed to make you suspicious of everyone. It isn't a tool for analyzing every facial expression, searching for hidden motives in every sentence, or pretending you can secretly read minds. It's a way to become less reactive and more observant. Instead of immediately asking, why are they doing this to me? Ask, what pattern am I actually seeing? Instead of deciding you understand someone after one uncomfortable moment, ask, is this an exception or is it consistent? Instead of treating your first interpretation as reality, ask, what might I be missing? Because once you begin observing people this way, something unexpected happens. The questions eventually turn toward you. What triggers me more strongly than it seems to trigger other people? What am I protecting when I become defensive? What relationship rules am I carrying without realizing it? What do my repeated actions reveal that my intentions don't? What familiar experiences do I keep recreating, even though I say I want something different. Understanding people eventually becomes a mirror. And perhaps that's the most valuable psychological truth of all. The goal isn't simply to become better at seeing through other people, it's to become better at seeing yourself. So which of these 8 truths changed the way you see someone in your life, or maybe the way you see yourself? Tell me in the comments. And if this video gave you something worth thinking about, leave a like. Then watch the video appearing on your screen right now. We'll keep exploring the hidden psychological patterns shaping how you think, feel, and relate to the people around you. The goal isn't to become better at judging people. It's to become better at understanding what you're actually seeing.